Welcome to the Tuesday edition of our Geography Awareness Week special webinars. Glad you could join us, and thank you for making time. I'm excited to be representing the California Geographic Alliance. In case I didn't say yet, my name is Tom Herman. I'm the director of the CGA, and I'm also here representing the California Global Education Project, or CGEP. Which is a longtime partner for the CGA and very much invested in global competence as well as geographic literacy. So today's themes are really around, shaped by what is happening in California education. Those of you who are joining us from California probably know that history and geography are forever together in our curriculum and in the way we teach social science. We teach US history and geography, world history and geography courses, and that's sometimes a surprise to the history teachers out there. But big props to those of you who are doing justice to the and geography part of your course titles. And if you're looking for ideas, maybe you'll find some today. So we're going to be exploring historical geography and place-based histories. My highlight teases, and awesome, we have Sean, a student, joining from Bonita Vista, or Bonita High in Chula Vista. Excellent. Well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to look up close at a 430-year-old map, which just happens to be 10 feet by 10 feet in size. It's one of the actual largest and oldest complete world maps you could find, and we're going to use the wizardry of distance learning to take a close look at it. We're also going to figure out how to do some place archaeology to actually dig into the past of your hometown or a place you care about in California to see how you can kind of reconstruct the past landscape using your computer and the internet. And then you might not have known that the Cold War era was marked by some really interesting cartography. So we're going to relive the great cartography of the Cold War and really just talk about how the way we see the world depicted on maps kind of infuses the way we think about the world and we think about our connections to other people. And when we emerged out of World War II and the Cold War, the concerns and the way we looked at ourselves as a one interconnected planet called for different representations. So we're going to take a look at that. So hopefully this is all of interest to you and you're in the right place. I experienced some minor technical challenges yesterday with our first webinar, and I'm hoping to have those mastered, but I will remind you, I'm an amateur, and you should be nice about the mistakes I'll certainly make. Welcome to Planet Earth. If you are included in this photograph, then geography is a relevant topic for you. We just want to take the time in a presentation like this, as I often do in conference presentations, to remind people to think about where we are, not just in terms of our street address or a job or student role, but to remember that we're on the planet Earth. We share that planet with other folks. And when we start looking at Earth and thinking about Earth, we want to be able to think like a geographer. And so we talked about this yesterday, but geographers use the spatial perspective, which is really about understanding where things are. And then the ecological or environmental perspective, which is about how things relate to each other. And so why are things located where they are? And what is the significance of that? Why should we care about that? Or why should we think about maybe changing it? So I'm going to be skipping back and forth between my PowerPoint slides here and a web browser. And that's going to require me to do some switching in terms of the screen share. So just bear with me. You don't need to launch a meeting. But we are going to go right into our, let's go to one of the things I struggled with yesterday was I wanted to do a bit more orientation than just a picture of the planet. So I pulled up Google Maps here, and one of the cool things that Google Maps did is that if you zoom out enough, it'll show you a view of the planet as if from space. So I wanted to repeat that again today, not just because I messed it up so badly yesterday, but because it's going to be relevant to our topic today about looking at the Earth. So just in terms of orientation, I'm coming to you from San Diego, still on planet Earth on the extreme eastern edge of the Pacific Ocean. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see we're on the extreme western edge of the North American continent. As I zoom in a little more, you're going to see the gray urbanized area pop in and the boundary, international boundary with Mexico. So I can describe my situation here as close to the international boundary with Mexico. Just going to keep zooming in here. I'm in the city of San Diego, well within the city limits. Here in the, where it's labeled gas lamp quarter and the San Diego label, that's downtown. Over here in College West, that's where San Diego State, where I work, is. And so I'm about midway between those two. And if I just keep zooming in through the magic of satellite data and geospatial technology, you can see that dot is located just about on the corner of this house, and that's where I am, just across the street from my local canyon where I go to observe wildlife and take walks in the morning. So that's where I'm coming to you from. And I just wanted to take time to orient and to remind you that you all have the ability to see where you are on Earth using geospatial tools in this way and really kind of shift your perspective, right? So, okay, so let's see if I can navigate back to my slides. Okay, so one of the things I mentioned yesterday is geography is great for many reasons. One of them is because we have one law and not more than one law. We're thinking about getting more, but for now, we're just working with this one, which is, for geographers, we realize that everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. So that means that zoom out view, when we're looking at the planet, everything on the planet is connected in some way, partially because it's in the same planetary system. But the things that are close by to us are more meaningful, more likely to have an impact on us than things that are distant. So that's just a simple rule of geography, and that helps us understand a lot of things. Another term for that is distance decay. So as distance increases, other types of relationships tend to decrease. All right. So we also talked about this excellent resource for both teachers and students, Geography for Life. And Geography for Life helps us organize this big discipline of geography, which is really, geography means studying about the Earth. So there's a lot that could be studied, and it's hard to describe what geography is about unless you break it down. So Geography for Life has 6 essential elements: the world in spatial terms, places and regions, physical systems, human systems, environment and society, and the uses of geography. And so we're going to be digging in today, talking about human systems, talking a little bit about places and regions and the environment. But we're also going to be digging into this last element, the uses of geography. So I'm going to click over here, and you'll probably get sick of me doing my screen sharing thing. But this website I'm taking you to is that Geography for Life book, essentially expanded into a web page. So here we see the introduction where it says geography is for life in every sense of that expression: lifelong, life-sustaining, and life-enhancing. And one of the things I really like about geography is I find people want to talk about geography even more outside of schools than they do inside, because geography is a discipline that really helps us understand life as a whole and the place that we live, both at a community level, a state, a national level, and at a planetary level. So here's the 6 essential elements that I just mentioned. And so when we get down here to the 6th one, the uses of geography, one of them is how to apply geography to interpret the past. And if I look at this, first of all, I get a description here up above. The geographically informed person must understand the importance of bringing spatial and ecological perspectives of geography to bear on the events of history and vice versa. So that's great. I've talked about those 2 perspectives. you get some concepts that are included within what it means to use geography to interpret the past. And those concepts are laid out as they might be explored or understood by students at different grade bands, 4th, 8th, and 12th, just as examples. So let's take a look at what's in here as far as the concepts. So if we're talking about using geography to interpret the past, one of the things that we need to understand is geographic context. So there's place characteristics, there's restrictions, there's possibilities that come about through the geography of the Earth or of a specific place. For example, down here at the first bullet point, you can't have the California gold rush of 1849 unless there's been geologic processes to put gold in the ground for miners to find. So that's a geographic context that helps shape the way that historical event plays out. So the second thing is thinking about change over time, that places, regions, and environments change over time. North America, when Europeans first arrived, had expansive forests. In the 400 years that Europeans have been here on the continent, we've cut down a lot of the trees and forests. So when we talk about the geographic context of North America or the United States mainland, that's different than what it was in the past. And we need to be able to put our mind back into earlier points in time and think about what that geographic context was then. And then this third one is a really important one I want you to think about, which is perceptions. So not only does the real world change over time, but what people think about the world, their perceptions of it change over time. And I often say to people when I'm giving presentations that it's easy to think about geographic contexts and assume that people are, and economists talk about this, as it would be so much easier if people were economically rational. Also, if people had perfect geographic information, they could operate in geographic context. But people don't have perfect geographic information. And oftentimes they have geographic misinformation or disinformation. And so they're making decisions and operating in a version of the world that they keep in their head. They're not actually operating in the world as we experience it as a third party. So there's perceptions. What people think about the world are really, really important as we think about interpreting the past and really understanding that saying that historians use, that those who fail to understand history are doomed to repeat it. Well, geography is going to be a key to helping us understand that. So let's have some fun and look at some different ways we can explore history in geography. And one really kind of obvious way, I think, is through historic maps, right? To see what the world, known world looked like and how people represented it and depicted it in the prior times. So I'm now on a website, the David Rumsey Map Library website. It's a really cool story because a lot of people think libraries with books and paper are disappearing and online libraries like this are a thing of the future. But this library went from online and is now a physical library at Stanford University because these maps all exist in real life and have been scanned for us to watch or view online. Now, what's amazing about this site is that it's got this little search engine up here, and you can search for different terms, and it will bring up maps for you to look at, lots and lots of maps. And you can see from this little rotating display here that not everything, there's kind of infographics as well as maps. Now, on this homepage for David Rumsey's map library, they're featuring this very cool map that's in their collection. So this is the one I was touting about looking at up close. So this is called Monte's Planisphere of 1587. So this was the state-of-the-art depiction of the world. This was the cutting edge of science about what was out there on our planet in 1587. And this was a map that was made in Milan, Italy, with information that was being collected, not just from one person's travels, but from all of the documentation and writings from explorers before 1587. And lots of maps had been made. Now I'm going to click on this and we'll kind of get a look at what happens when you're in Rumsey's map library. So it takes you to a page like this for each item. And on the left, what's really cool is there's like bibliographic information. So it tells you what is going on here, that this is a composite map, that it's from 1587, okay? That the author is Urbano Monti. And then it gives you some information that this is actually 60 sheets of paper stitched together to represent the whole world. And it tells you that it's 9 or 10 feet across. So information that you might not be able to get yourself, because guess what? This map's not going to be in English. But here's the real magical part. This map has been scanned in such detail that I'm going to zoom in. And you're going to see detail as if we were staring at the map up close as we could get our face to the map. Here's little hand lettered messages on the map, right? So this level of detail is possible because this map collector took such great care not only in collecting the maps, but in then scanning them and putting them online so that we can see them. So right away, I'm going to zoom back out and you'll realize you don't see many world maps that start in the shape of a circle, right? We're used to them being rectangular or oval-like. At the center of this map is the North Pole. And in 1587, this map maker put a continent at the North Pole. Well, we now know there isn't a continent at the North Pole. But there was ice, and probably early sailors who went close to the pole couldn't tell whether that ice was on land or floating in the water, so they recorded it. So one of the interesting things to go and look around a map like this is think about in 1587, what did they know? So here's Europe in 1587. And you'll see that it's quite detailed. There's lots of place names. There's lots of rivers. My internet's taking a minute to load on us. I'm probably taxing the system here a bit. There we go. And you can see a lot of detail. Now, by 1587, we're talking 100 years nearly after Columbus's voyages. So we'll go across the Atlantic. And we'll see what we see on the east coast of the United States. This is probably the St. Lawrence River. This Lago d'Arcadia, probably the lake in Vermont, but not, this might be Hudson River. It's not clear. It could be one of the Great Lakes. Interestingly, you're going to see Cuba in quite a bit of detail, and the island that Haiti is located in, quite a bit of detail. The northern coast of South America, quite a bit of detail. So there's a lot of information here, but some of it is like the shape of Florida is not quite right. But the Yucatan Peninsula is pretty close. Let's get over to the western coast, to California, and see. Well, here's the Gulf of California, and here's California. Not depicted as an island, as it sometimes is in maps of this era. Here's the coast of California. We go up, and there's really not too much going on here. But what is this? Oh, that's Japan. So Japan on this map is very close to the coast of California, is very large relative to California. So it's not very accurate. And then here we see the distance between Asia and North America, very, very narrow. In fact, the Bering Strait is very, very close, very small separation. So some accuracies and inaccuracies. Another interesting thing is all around the outside of the map is land. Well, that might seem strange to us looking at this projection, but that's Antarctica. So it's correct, essentially, that is, you know, the details might not be correct, but that is, in fact, land. So I want to contrast this map that I just showed you from Italy from 1587. This is another world map that I found on David Rumsey Map Library. I actually took this one to the California Council for the Social Studies and displayed in the booth as a discussion starter. Now, this map was produced in Japan in 1710, and you see that over here. The writing is actually Chinese. And the only reason I know this is from the bibliographic information here. And it tells us that this is a woodblock print, hand-colored in Chinese with Japanese annotations in red ink. And it shows the world based on Buddhist literature from India and China. And this map is based on a Buddhist conceptual view of the world with India at the center. So, okay, I'm going to zoom in on the map a little bit and show you what they're talking about. This is part of Buddhist cosmology that believes the 4 great rivers that flow out of the Himalayas are the origin of civilization. That's actually depicted here on the map with this spiral. So that I was able to figure out what's going on there. But then it gets really interesting. It says it includes contemporary European geographical knowledge. I'm going to zoom back out. Tell me if you see things that are familiar. This is Japan over here. And in fact, Japan is represented much more accurately than it was on our other map. But this turns out to be South America. Okay. This turns out to be India down here. And this is China with a bridge connecting, a land bridge connecting China to an unspecified continent over here. So a couple things that I want to point out by bringing these 2 maps out to share. One is, over time, people had different information about the world. People had different knowledge about what was out there. And so their ability to represent the world accurately kind of progressed. It generally improved over time, but there's a complicating factor because people have beliefs about the world that they hold very dearly. They're very important to them. So when part of their religion indicates that humanity started in India in the Himalayan mountains, well, that becomes part of the way you depict the world. So in 1710, well, there's additional scientific information to be accounted for that would make this map more accurate. There's also this worldview that's being prioritized, which might mean some of that scientific information is less important. So hopefully this is, encouragement for you to get into the David Rumsey map collection and check out some maps in close detail and learn something not only about what did people know about the world, but what did they think about it. And you'll realize it's a little bit challenging to pull those 2 things apart, because how do we know when we're looking at this map what was based on science and what was based on culture and belief? And how did those 2 things come together to create this portrayal of the Earth? And when we're looking at our modern maps, when I'm on Google Maps, and I'm showing you this type of detail, it's very photorealistic, and you can get the impression that there's absolutely no room for this kind of map to be inaccurate or distorting. But already I can tell you people decided to put some of these labels on here, right? So some things are labeled, some things aren't, some things are labeled in confusing ways. The projection that this map is based on is a Mercator projection. So it's actually distorting north. North is all across the top of the map, as opposed to north being a single point at the North Pole, like north really is. So even when we're looking at modern maps, maps that are produced with computer technology, it's important to remember the maps are depictions of the world. So they include both scientific information, but cultural bias and selection, just in terms of what gets shown and what doesn't get shown. All right, so let's get back to the PowerPoint, see if we can stay on track here. So we talked about the uses of geography, and we talked about the David Rumsey map collection as an excellent source of information. Yesterday I showed a map about the original 13 colonies, and we talked about why that was slightly misleading. So you can go back and check that out. I also, a few years back in 2015, I was invited to participate in a teacher institute at the Midway aircraft carrier that's parked here in San Diego. It's now a museum, and there's a Midway Teacher Institute where they do trainings for history teachers, primarily around World War II and the Cold War. So they invited me to come and contribute to their institute. And we did 2 things for that institute in 2015. One is I explained to the historians in the group that really the Cold War was a perfect topic. That was their theme for the year. The Cold War was a perfect topic to think about this issue I was just explaining: geographic knowledge, geographic context, and then geographic perceptions. Because in reality, our world shifted during the Cold War, not just because of the alignment into kind of blocks, superpower blocks, with countries forced to choose whether they were with the Soviet Union or with the United States, and other NATO countries, but also because we got into an era of missile-based warfare. It wasn't ships and tanks and soldiers bringing warfare around the world in a rather plodding approach where old-style maps were sufficient. But now missiles could be launched from long, long distances. And warfare could be, much like our distance learning and remote working of today, could be handled through computers and through technologies that didn't require people to come close to carry out war. And so what I did is I put together an introduction to the Cold War through maps and images, and I put that up on our California Geographic Alliance website. I'm going to show you a little bit about it. And I also I looked for a speaker to bring in, and I wanted somebody that was talking about this issue of Cold War maps. And it turned out there was a professor who had just written a book about this map I'm showing right now, Gulag Slavery Incorporated. This turned out to be an extraordinarily important map in the kind of organization of forces opposing Soviet Russia. So the United States worked with the American Civil Liberties Union to produce this map and to talk about the way in which the Soviet Union was enslaving its own population on gulags and using forced labor to carry out the work of this new Soviet empire. And so there's also a talk that we linked. Tim Barney, Professor Tim Barney from Richmond University, is actually a professor of writing and rhetoric studies. So he really analyzed this map as text and really talked about the environment in which this map was produced. And so that lecture is great, and it's available from our webpage. I will now try to share my other screen and see if I can find where, sorry, Zoom sometimes blocks what you want to find. Okay, so on our webpage, we have this visualizing the Cold War, teaching the Cold War through maps and images. I'll just point out that right here is the link to the talk I was just mentioning by Professor Tim Barney. And then this document right here is downloadable as a PDF. So we look at political cartoons, but also a lot of maps that were being printed in popular publications of the time. News magazines and news publications were coming out with more and more maps to help inform people about the nature of the Cold War. So it wasn't just cartoonish maps like this villainizing our opponents, but it was other ways of depicting the world. So I'm going to switch over to the map gallery, hoping that this all continues to work. So these are all maps I found on the Rumsey Map Library or other map libraries. So I'm going to show this map first. So this map, I often start, you see it over Tim Barney's shoulder in the talk, and people are fascinated by this headline: "The Russian Spider Sits Atop the World and Watches for More Victims." This is the Los Angeles Examiner front page. And I ask people, what's the date? And they assume this has to be post-World War II. This is a 1940 newspaper before the United States signed a treaty to join the Soviet Union in fighting against Nazi Germany. So it helps us understand that the Cold War, the sides in the Cold War were formed before World War II even played out. And a lot of the way World War II played out was shaped by this concern over the next coming era of struggle between two world powers. So the next map I'll show, and I'm not going to show all of these, don't worry. You're like, oh my goodness. So this map was really significant. A lot of people, if you were to have a collection of the 10 most significant maps in American history, this might make the cut, because William Eads Harrison went to Fortune magazine and got Fortune magazine to publish map inserts in their magazine. Now, this is a business magazine. It's not National Geographic, so the idea that they would have these pull-out maps was rather unusual. And Eads Harrison was basically trying to explain that Americans hadn't oriented themselves to the globe in a way that was going to help them understand the threat of the Soviet Union. And so you'll notice usually the deal with a map projection is to take this round world and flatten it down. But these orthographic projections that Harrison made, he didn't do that, because he realized that's helping confuse people about the organization of countries in space. And so he said, let's just look at the globe as a globe. And in this case, this world island map, you see the fact that the continent on which the Soviet Union sits is far larger than many people realized, connected to both Europe and Africa. And we're not really seeing North America, right? The other side of this globe is the part of the world that we're much more familiar with. So he's trying to put this world kind of into context for us so that we stop thinking about the world as a Mercator map and start thinking about the fact that we live on a globe. Because there were people that were inclined to try and deny the kind of seriousness of the Cold War and go about living their life. And so, for example, this was a popular map of the day, and it's about science marching on toward a better world. On the equator, it says, no spot on Earth is more than 40 flying hours from your local airport. So this map is trying to talk about an age of peace and the fact that the world is being brought together. That's enlightenment, that's cooperation, it's not warfare. And you notice what projection are they using? They're using the old Mercator projection that keeps the North American sphere safely over on the left-hand side of the map and the Soviet sphere over on the right-hand side of the map. That's exactly the kind of perspective that Eads Harrison was trying to undo with his orthographic map. And so people kept taking his cue, and you get maps like this projection, another projection that says, okay, I know we need to understand the world as a globe, but we also need to see it all at one time. So this is the cover map for an atlas, the Times Atlas of the world. And this was a new presentation of the world. And notice that the coloration is to show the alignment of the world into blocks, Western and communist alliances and Arab Muslim links, and then the unaligned countries that are not part of that yet. So just wanted to make sure to share this, the Cold War map library gallery, so that you could see the kinds of ways in which you can use the maps in the historic map library to really explore geographic perspectives, geographic context, and geographic perception. Okay, let's see. I also wanted, last time on our webinar, I put a shout out to National Geographic because I just appreciate the fact that they've been supporting geography education, and they've been putting resources out there for teachers and students to improve their geographic knowledge. So today I want to put out a shout out for Esri, ESRI, which is the world's leading software producer in mapping or geographic information systems. So they do a lot with geographic professions, but in the last few years, they've also done a lot for education. And so couple of things they've done is they've made their industry-leading software free for schools. It's cloud-based software, so you can use it through a web browser, and you'll see an example of that in a minute. And it's free for any school in the United States, actually any school in the world. They've also created some curriculum solutions that you can use even without the software. The curriculum solutions are called GAW inquiries, and they are standards-based learning activities that occur within a map environment. There are collections for US history, world history, government, as you see, earth science, environmental science, lots of different topics, not just geography. And so I encourage you to check those out and consider using those in your teaching and in whatever subject area and whatever grade level you do teach. So just like I showed you an example of what we could do with the David Rumsey Map Library, now I want to show you something that Esri has done with their platform that I think you'll find quite interesting. Now let me see if I can get over there. Okay, so what Esri has done is given us this time machine that can help us explore map making and the way places are represented on maps, but also what's been happening in our little part of the world. So this USGS Historical Topographic Map Explorer allows me to take a modern map and then overlay with it and explore every map that the United States Geological Survey has made of that same location. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my address. You've seen it on Google Maps. So here it is on Esri's base map. So that dot is wrong. This is me over here, but close enough. You should know that these outlines of the houses, this is all produced through artificial intelligence from satellite maps, satellite images. So that's how this base map is made. Now I'm going to click on my house there, and what pops up is a timeline. And this timeline shows different maps that have been produced by the United States Geological Survey. That was on the East Coast. They'd go back a lot earlier, but the earliest one I see here is 1904. And the most recent one is 1996. And you'll see they're in different colors because the different colors are different scales. Geologic Survey makes maps typically from 1 to 24,000 scale, which is a pretty detailed map, up to 1 to 250,000 scale, which is considerably less detailed, lets you see a whole region. So let's take a look at what it looks like if I pull up one of these maps. I'm going to pull up the most recent map. And what it does is it takes that old paper map. This is essentially a paper map that you could pick up, and it lays it over top of this new map. So I'm going to put my location right here in the middle of the screen. And once this map comes up, I'm able to make it more or less transparent using this slider. And then see, for example, I'm going to zoom back in. And now you can see that map accurately depicted my street there. I know my street's been here since 1927. So as I make it invisible, that street's more or less right where it should be, right? And there's my canyon. But notice here's Azalea Park, labeled as Azalea Park. Oh, there it is, labeled as Azalea Park. Hollywood Park is labeled there. So that's cool. Doesn't look like too much has changed. You can see how the area is represented. This pink shade basically means there's too many buildings there. It's urbanized, it's citified, and it's built up. So that's why that's there. So I'm going to make this transparent, and I'm going to go back to 1975. So now here's my 1975 map. And I'm going to do the same thing, make it invisible, bring it back. Where's Azalea Park? Where's Hollywood Park? They weren't there. They were actually not constructed yet, so they're not on the map. So right away, we're getting some indications of change. Okay. Also, I'm going to go ahead and crank up this 96 map. And keep an eye at what's pink versus what's white and green there in 96. Now back in 76, the pink was a little further back, right? So there was a little less of this area that was called urbanized. Those black rectangles are actually buildings that were there. but not a huge change. Schools are still there. You still see a lot of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to 1953. I'm just going to take these other ones out of here so I don't get confused. Here's our original map. I'll zoom out a little bit. This is our modern map. In 1953, these two giant freeways that run right next to my house, they weren't here yet. So not only was Hollywood Park not there yet, Azalea Park not there yet, but this big freeway intersection was not there, where Interstate 805 and Interstate 15 crossed. There was a 4-lane freeway here, but not those freeways. And so we can go back and see, oh, that's pretty interesting, that changed. Let's go back one step further to 1944. Now in 1944, that freeway is completely gone. You just see the service streets, and you see that Alexander Hamilton School is one of the oldest schools in my area. So this USGS Historical Topographic Map Explorer is a really cool tool to let you reconstruct the past in your community and see when things, at least the time window, when they appeared, but also to have a discussion about how is this map a generalization of what's happening, and what can you learn, and what still remains to be explored about what the landscape actually really looked like in that location where the map was shown. Okay, so we're up to 40 minutes, and I'm feeling like I probably was a little ambitious with what I was going to share today, so I'm going to skip some things. I was going to talk, and I'll just mention this, that on our, in addition to the California Geographic Alliance, at San Diego State University, I'm involved in a research center called Young People's Environments, Society, and Space Research Center. And by the way, if you have questions that you'd like to ask about anything that's been presented, feel free to type those into the Q&A or into the chat window for that matter, and we'll take some questions at the end of the webinar. But back to this Preserve Little Italy project, our research center partnered with a community here in San Diego. That's a very trendy, up and coming downtown area, lots of gentrification there, lots of investment, and it's known as Little Italy. And so we were able to research the history of that neighborhood and kind of reconstruct the past using some of those tools I just showed you, but also getting some historic photos, and then interviewing people that had grown up in the community in the 1940s and 50s and comparing their lived experiences and the stories they told to what we could see on the maps and what we could see in the historic data. So that's very cool. And those kinds of neighborhood place-based histories I wanted to share because I think every school is in fact a hub of a community, and it would be great to have students in schools all around California putting together place histories to understand the ground that the school sits on, and connecting back to the indigenous cultures that occupied the territory before Europeans arrived, but also thinking about how parts of our state were included in Mexico, were claimed by Russia, have all this different diverse history with immigrants arriving at different times, and that's really rich history that's unique to each place in the state, and would love to see more students exploring that. Okay, so before we get to questions, I'll just put out